David. I just wanted to get your opinion about whether you thought that Donald Trump was committing acts of stochastic terrorism.
Yes. So I do think so. If you've not heard the term stochastic terror, this is the idea that if you have access to forms of mass communication, like the bully pulpit of the presidency of the United States, or a big media presence, or whatever sort of mass communication method that might be, you can incite random actors to carry out violent or terrorist acts that are statistically predictable but individually unpredictable. It means that when Donald Trump says things like the Second Amendment people maybe can find a solution if Hillary Clinton gets elected, those are statements that when someone makes a statement like that, we can't specifically predict who is going to be motivated to commit an act of real world violence when they hear that. But if you're reaching a large enough number of people, you can statistically predict that someone is going to.
That was some guy named David Pacman who 4 years ago recorded that, of course, blamed all violence on Trump saying things because it was statistically inevitable. He has nothing to say about the statistical inevitability of Biden's speeches, for instance. Isn't that interesting? Hello again, everybody. Well, our question today, the question of the week, and soon to be a question on everyone's lips, is what do you get when you marry stochastic terrorism with hypocrisy? Let's find out. Now, all of you who listen to this, read the blog, I'm sure remember the basics of chaos theory. Like how a drunken woman getting a tattoo of a butterfly flapping its wings in Ibiza sends off a unpredictable chain of connected causal events that eventually leads to, I don't know, Uncle Joe Biden giving another $50 billion or so to Ukraine through certain intermediaries, of course. Now, the key with chaos theory that we all recall is extreme sensitivity to initial conditions. Alter just one thing in the smallest degree at the beginning. Say the woman opts for Margaritas instead of Watermelon Stoli, and the money instead gets shifted to a pharmaceutical. All right, the thing is this. If you were a Pfizer rep boozing it up with that broad, you wouldn't know which drinks to fetch. The string of events leading to the payoff is just too huge and unknowable. Prediction is out of the question. Unless, and this is the key for us today, unless you renamed that unpredictable causal chain stochastic terrorism. Yes, this is a new bit of the science from the regime. The idea is that anything violent, which may or may not mean literal violence, it could be just metaphorical violence, anything violent that happens to a woke can be traced back to its beginnings to an instance of quote-unquote hate from a realist. It's just exactly like the money going to Ukraine example in the sense that the chain of causation from the quote-unquote violence to the so-called hate can be long, tangled, and impossible to see without a woke science filter. Whereas in chaos, the ascription of causation to some end event is impossible in scenarios like ours. In systemic terrorism, all so-called violence is prejudged to have been caused, or at least facilitated by realists. Here's the latest example was just over the weekend. Some nightclub or whatever was shot up, and they're not saying why as of yet, so I can't tell you why as of yet. It's a bunch of people who go and appreciate sodomy, enjoy this nightclub. And it's already being called an instance of stochastic terrorism. So we'll see if that turns out to be the case. Usually it does not turn out to be anything like the initial reports, so we'll wait on that. But here's the funniest example. This one's confirmed. This is from the City Journal. I have a link at the blog. Turns out this is a story that Chris Rufo wrote. Now, he was on Tucker Carlson's show discussing this plague of men in women's dresses at libraries who are being given free access to the children. And the same night his episode aired, Paul Pelosi, and his hammer buddy had their little get-together. Now, we statisticians wouldn't even call this a coincidence. It's given that there were billions, Carl Sagan billions of other events that also happened at the same time or around the same time as Carlson's episode aired. But it was called Stochastic Terrorism by one guy. This guy named Bryn Nelson said so in an article he wrote in what is still amazingly called Scientific American. Scientific American, that's a political journal of the woke. Nelson says Rufo engaged in, quote, ideologically driven hate speech. And Nelson intimated that hate speech led to the hammer blows, caused the hammer blows in Stochastic Terrorism. Now, it's clear. You read through it. It's a very long article in Scientific American. The link's on the blog. That this Nelson has no love for Rufo or anybody who supports Rufo. He has unkind things to say about Carlson and former President Trump as well. He's just dripping with disgust over over this trio and anybody that supports him, and he absolutely vilifies anybody who likes Trump because their hate, these people's hate, his word, like the Ibiza lady's tattoo, causes stochastic terrorism of the kind that happened to Pelosi. Now, it's not just Scientific American. This is being used all over the place, this phrase. This new bit of the science is touted by Press Watch, for instance. They put it this way. This is a quote. Stochastic terrorism means terrorism that's statistically predictable. There we go, predictable, but individually unpredictable, so we can blame anybody we like. In simpler language, it means that when Trump, of course Trump, it means that when Trump or his allies encourage violence, when they say the kind of stuff they say all the time now, and that's emphasized in their article, it is not just possible that someone at some point will do something about it. It's damn near inevitable. I guess this Nelson's crystal ball is shinier than the Press Watch's because Nelson's able to tie Pelosi's attack directly to Rufo, whereas Press Watch just blames anybody, all Trump supporters. Now, their claim is simple. Hate, disgust, vilification, and heated rhetoric all cause stochastic terrorism. Here's another quote. This is also from Press Watch. When Fox personality Jesse Waters says, they've declared war on us and now it's game on, it's not just talk. It's stochastic terrorism. I still have to get one of those soundboards with the dun dun dun. I mean, I can't do this podcast without it. Anyway, if anybody knows where I could find one of those, let me know. Now, now, it's obvious to any of us listening, to any realist, that the constant hate, vilification, disgust, and heated rhetoric spewed by the woke doesn't cause stochastic terrorism. Thus, Nelson spinning in a circle and calling his enemies bad people has no terroristic effect and cannot produce violence, even when it does. Such as when, that Shannon Brandt ran over and murdered the kid because he thought the kid was a Republican extremist. Or when that Darrell Brooks blasted into a Christmas parade and murdered and maimed his racial enemies. Or when Steve Scalise and others were blasted by an inflamed woke for the woke guy out for realist blood. Or when, look, is there any reason to continue? We all know of these instances. There's many more. Now, you'd think that this Jovian, so therefore, their rhetoric is also causing violence, or it's definitely causing violence, whereas the rhetoric by Rufo, it's a stretch beyond the breaking point to say that Rufo had anything to do with Pelosi's hammer attack. So you would think that this Jovian level of blatant throbbing flashing, bright neon hypocrisy would at least cause mild discomfort in the minds of those promulgating systemic terrorism. But it doesn't. They have no qualms using the same techniques they condemn in their enemies. And because the left is everywhere in charge, using them with greater frequency and intensity. Hypocrisy is an unknown word to them. They don't feel it. When you present them an example, such as above, they can't see it. Why? Well, because the left believes in the enemy. They must have one. Must, I say, because they believe there is an arrow to history. And they are leading the way to a utopian future. Since we're clearly not at utopia now, it necessarily means, if there's an arrow to history, that there are people alive now holding back this bliss, the enemy. Well, without this fantasy of paradise brought about by their unique efforts, they would have no need to fight this constant war against hate. The one-way sign is why they do not see it as hypocrisy to hate the enemy, while simultaneously condemning hate. That's it for today, everybody. Happy trails.
Happy trails to you. Keep smiling until then.
Who cares about the clouds when we're together? Just sing a song and think about sunny weather.
Happy trails to you till we meet again.